Hello and welcome back to another episode of the Eden Road podcast, where on today's show, we're going to be previewing Aston Villa's visit to the Gtech on Saturday. And delighted to say that Luke is back on the channel. Luke, how you doing, mate?
Yeah, good, mate. Thanks for having me back on your show.
No worries, no worries. Let's carry on with the preview. Just before we get going, remember to drop a comment down below with your thoughts ahead of the game on Saturday. Subscribe to the YouTube and Spotify channels. Follow us on the socials at the Eden Road on Twitter, at Eden Road Pod on Instagram. Luke, I think only one place to start, really. Opening day thoughts, 0-0 draw against Newcastle. How did you see it?
Not how it played out. It was 12:30 back at Villa Park, absolutely buzzing. Over the years, we've had some good games against Newcastle, especially at home. It feels like whenever we play them, one team gets battered, the other team loses heavily, vice versa. A couple of years ago, we lost 5-1 to them on the opening day away. And so I was expecting goals. We've had a pretty good pre-season where we've played well, had different systems. But yeah, we weren't great. We were, we just got overrun in midfield, didn't play the best, just looked a little bit off it. I think Newcastle played really well. Tonali, Gomes, Gillington, top midfield, and they overran us really. And I think it was one of them where, because we are competing with Newcastle, and we have been, and we missed out on Champions League last year on goal difference. You know, we are two very tightly matched teams, and I think they, in the end, kind of wanted it a bit more, and they'd got a bit more spirit than us. I think after the games, I was hearing them talk about Isaac, how it's made them stronger and together, and a want to do well this season. And I just think we kind of got overrun a little bit, especially first half. Second half, we came out a lot better. We looked the better team for probably the first 15 minutes, and then Konsa gets sent off and it's backs against the walls defending, and we defended good. Like we limited them to shots from distance. So in the end, I think I'd have took a point before, and I definitely would have took it afterwards, being down to 10. So yeah, a lot more to come from Villa, I hope, this season.
Obviously, Konsa is going to miss out on Saturday. What's the latest with Emi Martinez? Is he going to play, do you think?
I wouldn't, no. I would stick with his name's Bezot, so I'd stick with him in goal. There's been a lot of talk about Martinez leaving. Cried on the last home game of last season. Looked like he was going to Man United. And we've moved on Olsen, thankfully, because he just, every shot that went at him went in. So we finally got a good number two. He kept a clean sheet, played well. Martinez was only suspended for one game. So I would keep him in goal, I think. I wouldn't swap Martinez, I don't think. Just because like we've had bad number twos, and this guy's got confidence now, and we're going to need him this year, especially in the Europa League as well. So I think while he's got confidence, let's not mess about with him too much and just let him keep it, really.
Is Martinez going to stay, do you think? Or do you think he'll go before the window shuts?
I think he will stay. I think he's been probably priced out of a move. I think Villa, and we'll get onto this in a second, you know, we've got financial restrictions, but the one thing we've done is we've been very firm on our valuations of our players. So I think it's around 40 million that we value Martinez at, and we're going to keep him at that valuation. We're not buckling and just going, oh, actually, have him for 30 then. So I think I just can't see anybody paying what we want for him, really.
Unless United come calling.
Yeah, if they do, if they come with 40, then it'll go. But
up into 50, it'll go.
I don't think they'll come in for him. I don't think.
Apart from Martinez, you mentioned he got overrun in midfield. I was looking at the lineup and obviously watched the highlights. The Tielemans plays a 10 on Saturday. He did, yeah.
Yeah.
What was that like? Because I like Tielemans. I thought he was your most important player last year, to be honest, and one of the better midfielders in the league. But I always thought that he was better sort of in an 8 or just picking the ball up and threading passes and driving past players. But what was he like in the 10?
Not great. Limited to the ball, which he only had around 30 touches, where normally he's getting around 70, 75 touches a game. He has played there before. So Europa Conference League, when we were in that a couple of seasons ago, he played there. But yeah, I think what he tried to do is go with Onana physicality, Kamara in his normal position. What then generally happens is the 10 will drop and make up a midfield 3. Player on the right will invert and go and support Watkins. So that's how it normally would work. But the distances weren't great, and we really got overrun. So hopefully he's not there again. But I'd put him next to Kamara, I think, or
Right.
Onana, because Kamara might have to play centre half if he doesn't trust Bogart to play there at the weekend because of Konsa's suspension.
Okay, cool. We'll talk about Saturday in a bit more detail a bit later on. But you know, as it's the start of the season, I'd ask you about your summer business. But in Villa's case, a lack of business. Talk me through why Villa haven't spent this window too much.
We have been in a big hole with financial restrictions. And what I'll caveat this and say is that obviously around 7 years ago, we were in the Championship. So we've had to do things to be able to compete, to get to a position where we are growing, we are competing with the teams in and around 4th, 5th, 6th, etc. So our model has generally been a wages ratio where we max out the wages to a very high level. That has enabled us to get Champions League football, to bring in really good players. Now, we've obviously had PSR, which hasn't been the greatest. When we qualified for the Champions League, we sold Douglas Luiz and we sold DRB. And that was the season when we went into the Champions League and we were thinking, we're going to be able to do loads. And you have to sell one of your best players, and then your next best player you had to sell as well. So we've been involved in managing our finances, and this summer was exactly the same. I mean, we sold Duran in January for around 70, but financially, there was a lot of noise about Villa with PSR. We sold the women's team, and that navigated through that. And then you're celebrating, you've conquered PSR, and then UEFA come along and go SCR, and you're like, no, it's PSR. And they're like, no, SCR is squad cost rules. So UEFA, while being in Europe, each year they allow, I think it was something like 90%, 80%, 70% of your turnover to wages revenue, and that's what you've got to work. So we've had to limit the wages, get the wage bill down, but in turn, while, like I mentioned earlier, we've been on this journey, we've had to sign certain players. So when we had Christian Perslow, he ruined us by signing Coutinho on 125 grand a week, then Donker on 90 grand a week, and those players have only just left this window. So we've had to battle with that as well. And then you're now seeing players like Jacob Ramsey, Bailey's gone out on loan, and it's all about Villa trying to get this wage bill down. So we're on like this UEFA plan where we've got to consistently work and reduce the wages to be able to compete in Europe. If we don't do it, we get kicked out of Europe. So it's just something really frustrating that we're having to do. So another element to it as well is, so for example, if we sign a player now, they have to be on less wages and have to be sort of worth kind of less than the player that's gone. So we sold Jacob Ramsey, but he was only on 70 grand a week. So we can't go out and buy a player and put him on 85, 90 grand a week. He's got to be on less than what Ramsey was on. So you're hamstrung with kind of like the players that you can attract as well. So it's just really frustrating as a football fan that we're doing really well, but we can't kick and push on even further financially.
It sounds like you're going to have to navigate the transfer market in the coming windows, be that this summer or January in the next summer, with a little bit more of a considered hat on, in terms of, because, you know, to break into that top 6 and into the top kind of 4 of the league, you look at the signings that Liverpool have made, you look at the signings that City and Spurs are making at the moment. There's a big marquee signings, 50 million plus, in Liverpool's case, 100 million plus. Sounds like Villa, well, PSR in its current state is not going to allow Villa to do that. You're going to have to be a bit smarter in the transfer market. Maybe not adopt the same way that Brentford and Brighton do things, but certainly the same kind of mantra in terms of buying undervalued players and making them perform at that level. But just like I took this from a BBC Sport article. It says, for context, as previously reported by BBC Sport, Arsenal, Chelsea, Manchester United, Liverpool, and Manchester City spent more on wages than Newcastle generated revenue in the Premier League's most recent published accounts, which is crazy. But that, I think, is that the nature of it? Is that the nature of the beast? These clubs, they're on a different level, and the current rules are making it nigh on impossible for clubs like Villa and clubs like Newcastle to actually get to get into the closed shop.
Or any club really that's not, you look at teams coming up from the Championship. So Sunderland, for example, they've smashed it this window. They've gone out and blown 100 million plus on players. They can't do that every year because there'll become a point where the Premier League go, stop. You don't generate enough revenue to be able to spend past this. So the problem is, look at Man United, for example, as well. Man United were terrible last year. Doesn't matter because their revenue is at 700 million. Their bad season, they will always be able to spend. If Villa finished 15th this season, it's game over because we need Europe to be able to bring in more revenue. So Champions League, I think we made about 90 million last season in prize money. Europa League is probably around 30 to 40, but that's still a substantial amount of money. And Villa's revenue is slowly going up. Like last year, it was around 340 million. This next financial should be a lot more. So we're making that progress, but it takes time. It takes time to get there. And these clubs that are in, say, the so-called Big Six, because they're so established already, that money's just there all the time. And that's where the big frustration, I think, is for football fans. So Nottingham Forest going out and blowing a load of cash this window. Don't be surprised in 2 years' time, they're in the same position that Villa are in because it's all about the revenue, and it's just really frustrating as a football fan. And I'm looking at Villa and I'm thinking, God, we're in the promised land. We're in the Champions League. We've got a great manager, but he can't spend a penny now. And to most football fans, they're probably thinking, God, you've had it great. My club's probably never going to be in the Champions League. But, I'm looking at this from another point of view of all these clubs in the Premier League, there's just a level you can get to. And unfortunately, you're not going to be able to get much further.
And you just mentioned it. We you got Unai Emery, got all these exciting players, and we're sat here talking about fucking PSR, talking about football finance. Is there, just before we move on, is there any animosity amongst the fan base towards this wage to turnover ratio? Because I think looking at it from the outside perspective, it looks a little bit like Villa have said, right, this is it. We're going to do it. We're going to get Unai Emery and we're going to spend all this money on wages. And when it doesn't work, or when you don't get Champions League football, this is what happens. Is there a separation of the fan base in love for Emery and maybe a little bit of frustration with the board in terms of the business decisions?
I just think those decisions had to be made to get us to this point to start with, if that makes sense, because we've used it as a way around getting able to navigate sort of like PSR. Within PSR, if Villa weren't in Europe this season, we would be able to buy more players because PSR, we're fine now. It's the wage section of it. And it's just really frustrating that we're in this position. So we've just got to try and navigate it the best we can. But I mean, everybody's just fully on board. I mean, the Villa and Newcastle fans were chanting about the Premier League, and it's not a great look, is it really? No. When fans are now starting to do that, and I think there'll be more and more. I think it's just going to be something that just fans just get sort of like really disconnected with the league that we're actually in, and the whole closed shop feeling of just how far you can go. I mean, Unai Emery had this phrase that he brought when he came in, and he said that there's no limits to our dreams. And
saw that on the tifo. Was that on the tifo at Villa Park?
That's his phrase, and I think it's so powerful because it enables fans to be able to like dream of things that might not be possible, but there is a limit. It's a financial limit. So now that's sort of like got your thumb on it. And so from a Villa point of view, like it's really frustrating, but we've got Emery. He's the main thing that we need because he can be the difference maker between he should probably get us into Europe, like whether it's 7th this season. So he's never not finished outside of the European places. So I think we're going to have a good season, but it's just adapting to these financial rules, really.
I would say on the back of that chat and the lack of transfer activity on Villa side, if you have any worries about competing in the Europa League this season, but obviously you've got Unai Emery, who is the master of the Europa League. Off the back of that, what's success for Villa, would you say, this season?
I think what I wanted last year, so when we was in the Champions League and we got to the quarterfinals, I wanted us to get Europe again. So I was aiming, I predicted 6th last season and we got 6th because I didn't want it to count for nothing. And even though we did really well in the financial, had a good element of it, I wanted us to be able to take those experiences from last year into this season because, we've been on a bit of a journey in Europe and we're getting better and we're competing better against better teams. So I think for me, I want to see us get to the final of it. I think I don't want to sit here and say I want us to win it. I want us to go deep into it because we got to the semi-final of the Conference League. We played Olympiacos and lost. We got to the quarters of the Champions League. Let's get to the final and see where we are, and hopefully have a real good go at it. And this season we should have. Try and have 2 opportunities. I think 5th, if our coefficient's good, we'll get Champions League again. So we could try and aim for that. And then if we win Europa, you get Champions League. So 2 goes at it, really. So hopefully we're able to do it.
Saturday then, Luke. Any changes to the side that drew against Newcastle? You mentioned Konsa won't be available. You think that they should stick with Bizot in goal. How do you see Villa setting up on Saturday against Brentford?
Hopefully more attacking. I felt like Emery was a bit safe against Newcastle. We had 4 central midfielders on the pitch, which says it all, really. There's no width. So I would like to see him bring Maatsen in at left back. I think he's a player that we signed last summer and has been a bit of a bit part player. I think he's better going forward than Digne. I would bring in Marlon, maybe. I think I'd probably bring him in a bit more direct, a bit of pace as well. And it's just what he does with the centre-back situation. He could bring in Bogard, who's a young lad who's done well sort of in pre-season, or he might put Kamara in there. So if he puts Kamara in there, then who he can play there anyway, then you'll have a double pivot of Onana and Tielemans. So I think those are sort of the options that he's got. Watkins was very sharp in pre-season, didn't really have too much service against Newcastle. Rodgers had a bit of a bad game as well, so he wasn't really firing, but he should be confident now he's won PFA Young Player. So, yeah, hopefully a more vibrant Aston Villa, really.
Looking at the games last season, particularly at Villa Park, I think it was in December time. It's the first time I saw Morgan Rodgers live, and I was blown away by how good he was. He was unbelievable that game. Completely ran the show. Other than that, Watkins always seems to get a goal against us. How do you see Saturday going, do you think?
It's tough to like your fan base, probably. It's tough to look and know what to expect. I mean, I can only go off what I've seen against Nottingham Forest, but I do think you'll make changes and I do think you'll be better. You've got good players that didn't play last week, but I think that little pocket in between your midfield 2 and centre backs, I think, like you mentioned, Rodgers will want to get in there. Can we try and play through your midfield 2? Can we try and maybe create a bit of an overload with your midfield 2? I think set pieces, you're quite direct with that long throw. Collins peeling off. I think he's a massive threat for you. So I think we've got to look at that area. Try and shut down Damsgaard. Give you striker no space, really. Player that I do like, Shard. I think he's brilliant. And, if we could have a player from you, he'd probably be the one that I actually really rate as well. And just great to see Henry back on a football pitch. I think you've got the other young lad on the other side. Hickey. Is it Hickey?
Hickey is also coming back from a long-term injury, but we start with Coyote on the right and Henry started on the left against Forest.
Yeah, so good to see them back. Try and push your fullbacks back. So those are probably like my observations really from the first game. I mean, if Rodgers can play like Gibbs White did, then
Yeah,
we should get some
we're in
joy.
trouble.
But
We're in trouble.
I don't know what to expect. He might not change much, but I imagine he probably will.
And just an outside perspective, just before we finish, Luke, on Brentford, lots of noise around us this season. I've just been on your pod and told you that hopefully it's all going to be fine. But from an outside perspective, how do you see us getting on this year?
I think it'll be tough at times. I think, but like I say, I really like your football club. I've loved Thomas Frank's journey, and I think he's been able to sort of like make me like Brentford, apart from when you had Mopai. But so I liked your players. I've enjoyed watching you and how expressive you are, and it's just that unknown, isn't it? I think Andrew's coming in with, I just don't know what you don't know what to expect because you've not seen sort of like a case study before. So I think there's a lot of learning maybe, and if you can learn quickly and adapt and get things going quickly, then you should be okay. But I think you'll survive. I think you've got enough players, and then you can just build on it really. But I think he's just got to get some points on the board quite quickly, just to give you confidence and for everything like that, really. So, pretty much it, really.
Points on the board on Saturday, then, is that what we're hoping for, Luke?
No, not on Saturday. After Saturday, it'll be fine.
Nice one, Luke. That was an absolute pleasure. We'll be back after the Villa match on Saturday. Remember to drop a comment down below with your thoughts ahead of the game. Subscribe to the YouTube and Spotify channels. Follow us on the socials at the Ealing Road on Twitter, at Ealing Road Pod on Instagram. Luke, an absolute pleasure, mate. Good luck for the season, but obviously not. Good luck for Saturday.
And you.